Welcome to this episode of Mixternal Messaging. Today, I am joined by Mike Petchenik of Petchenik Media Group. So excited to have him here. We're going to dig into how earned media plays a role in your internal and external brand messaging. So Mike, thank you for joining me.
Glad to be here.
Mike has a really interesting background. You've got 20 years in the industry of journalism. 12 of those was spent at the Atlanta station, Channel 2, as a broadcast journalist. You've done radio, you've done like health tech stuff on dealing with internal communications and external marketing and PR for that brand. You've launched your own podcast, you've launched your own business. What haven't you done, Mike?
A lot, actually.
Yeah.
Still have a lot of life left to live.
Yeah, you do. You're tackling on a lot of projects, which we'll dig into a little bit as well today. But first, I have a really important question for you, Mike. If you could have any superpower in the world, what would it be?
So I would love to be able to read people's minds.
Would you?
Yeah, I think so. Only when they've made up their mind and I need to sort of know what they're thinking before I make a decision, it would be helpful. In my own personal life, but also in business would be great too.
I don't know. I would struggle with that one. I don't always want to know what everyone's thinking, but I hear you on the once they've resolved a thing.
Yeah.
To clue you in before they clue you in. Verbally.
Exactly. Right. Because you always hear people say, oh, well, I can't read your mind. Well, if I could do that.
You could do that.
I could solve a lot
That
more
would be
problems.
a shortcut, and you would look like a hero a lot.
I think so.
Yeah. Just step in intuitively and do a thing.
That's right.
That would be exciting. Okay. Great superpower. Little scary, but good. I do want to dig into our topic today. So earned media. You are a pro at this. You have lots of experience in this realm. How do you see earned media playing into the internal and external brand messaging? What is the importance of that from your perspective?
Sure. I mean, earned media, PR, it's all about brand awareness. But what happens internally can affect you externally as well. And we've seen a number of recent situations where something that's happened inside of a company has gone viral on the outside and not to the benefit of the company. A couple of recent examples of a tech employee who recorded herself being laid off. Yep. On TikTok. She put it out there. It went viral. And the problem was there was some dissonance between the internal message and what was shared externally. She was told that it was because of her performance, but they couldn't back it up, and she was calling them out on it. And then the CEO went on social media and tried to kind of deflect and cover his bases, and it didn't go over very well. And, so if I'm looking to go work for that company and I see that, it's not really a good message that you want to put out there. Another example just recently of a woman who worked for a company that's in the baby industry. She had a child in the NICU, asked the CEO for permission to work remotely. It was denied. She went on social media, shared it with the world. It didn't look good for the company. And then the CEO goes on social media, reads a very canned statement, tries to protect her brand, and it went sideways. And then she had to get back on social media again and apologize for apologizing. And it spiraled out of control. So everything that happens inside the brand can absolutely affect what happens outside.
So employees can be your biggest brand advocates. They can be your best marketers. They're sharing at the dinner table, on their social platforms, everywhere externally in their natural circles. They can say how much they love the brand, the company that they're working with, or the opposite, right? And it is such a missed opportunity when the employee experience doesn't align with what you've promised, like externally you represent. That's when we see all the negative reviews and things start to trickle in. And people will believe your employees before they'll believe a marketing slick or something, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
They're going to trust those voices. So we've talked about some of the scary things that can go wrong. In your experience, what have you seen go well? How have you contributed to some of the stories of, some brands that you've worked with? Share a little bit about your experience there.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously when you're sharing news with media, you want to have something that's newsworthy and worthy of their coverage. That's why it's called earned media. You're trying to earn the right to be covered. But in some cases, you may not have something that's earth-shattering to share. So I find that it's really helpful to put your leadership out there as the experts. So when you're reaching out to reporters, being a resource for them so that while they're working on their stories of the day, you can provide them with that expertise, that person who knows about the industry, who can share something that's worthy of being included in that coverage.
Yeah, having those subject matter experts has been invaluable. I know some of the deals we've partnered on really like leaning into what journalists are already covering is super important. So maybe talk a little bit about that, because I think sometimes people like spray and pray, or they're just pushing out their agenda and not necessarily paying attention to what a journalist wants to see.
Yeah, so, and speaking from the position of a former journalist who was sprayed and prayed pretty frequently with just a blast of pitches throughout the day, it is important to be targeted and to do your research and do your homework ahead of time. You know, an example that I love to give about my time in the newsroom, I got a pitch one time in my inbox, and the subject line was, "Have you ever wondered what it would be like to be a sugar daddy?" To which I responded, "No, not really."
No, thanks.
The problem with that pitch was I worked in a large metro newsroom that covered hard news. We would never in a million years cover a story like that. So that told me that the person, the PR practitioner on the other end of that email, didn't do their homework. They were given a list of reporters in a newsroom and just told to send it out and hope, that somebody will pick up the story. The point there is, when you are working with clients, as I do, I try to keep up with the trends that are out there. I try to keep up with the stories they're covering. And then when I reach out to them, I say, "Hey, you just covered a story on X. I have an expert that can talk to you about Z. It might be a great follow-up to what you're working on." Or keeping up with the editorial calendars in some of these publications. So you have an idea throughout the year, these are the subjects that they're planning to cover, so that when you have news that you can fit into that coverage, you can share it with them.
That's really, it is a both and approach, right? There's the planning ahead, looking at editorial calendars, anticipating what they're going to be and covering so that you can naturally fold into those things. But then there's also the really time sensitive, hey, if I don't get on the radar right now, they're probably not going to, write about this. Or what is the term you use when you're like hijacking?
Newsjacking is the term that people will use. And it's a double-edged sword, because if you do it too much and you put yourself out there in every situation, then you lose a little bit of your credibility there. But if you find the right opportunity, there's a story going on. An example, recently, a client that I've been working with, there was some legislation that would affect the industry. And so we thought this would be a great opportunity to put out the thought leader as an expert to talk about that. So the pitch to the reporter was, "Hey, you're covering the story about this new change to the law. I've got a guy who's been working in this field for years, who's got some great background that he can share with you." And it works, because the reporters are always looking for resources. And if you can help them do their job better, they're more likely to reach back out to you.
And it is about being a value add to reporters, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, they don't care about the marketing pitch. They don't care about the sales pitch. They care about the resource, what's going to help them do a good job on their story.
So I want to get into one topic and then we'll pause for a minute. But how have you seen earned media kind of shifting over the last 10, 15 years as you've been in that space? And particularly since you've been on both sides now, where do you see the changes that have been impacting the business the most? What is that looking like?
Number one, nobody's sending fax press releases anymore.
No faxing?
Yeah, and if they are, then welcome to the 21st century. That used to be a thing. We would get those stacks of faxes on the assignment desk fax machine, and then the assignment editor would go through and trash most of them. I think technology has made it much easier for people to get a hold of reporters. Again, a double-edged sword there, because you don't want to be texting or calling a reporter if you've got no relationship with them. It's a little off-putting, I think. I certainly felt that way if I got an outreach like that. But email has made it a lot easier. It's made it easier to personalize the pitching for the reporters, so they don't feel like they're being just blasted with a bunch of stuff.
Nice. Yeah. I actually remember taking cupcakes to an office once with my media folders, paper folders, to try to get in with the local newspaper before I started pitching them things. Mm-hmm. It was I would feel really awkward doing that now. It would feel really intrusive.
Yeah, there still is a place for that. I think I've heard somebody refer to it as a desk side chat. Yeah. I think because of what we just went through with COVID, you're less likely to maybe get entry into a newsroom. And the reality is most reporters probably aren't in the newsroom every day anymore anyway, right? So A virtual desk side chat certainly is not out of order. If you reach out to a reporter, hey, can we just talk like on background? Let me help you out with your stories. Maybe I could be a resource for you. That's great, because I think, again, if you're providing value to the reporter, they're going to be interested in talking to you about something.
And continuing that conversation.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to take a brief pause. I'm here with Mike Petchenik of Petchenik Media Group, and we'll be back in just a minute for more Mixternal Messaging.
Mixternal Messaging, Marcom that roars, is brought to you by Liger. Tired of your brand message being a whimper instead of a roar? Mixternal Messaging cracks the code on the secret weapon of B2B success, uniting your internal and external brand narrative. We're taking deep dives into the challenges and strategies to craft a message that resonates, both inside your company and with your clients. No fluff, no theory, just real stories and actionable insights from the trenches. We'll be interviewing marketing and communication rock stars, hearing their triumphs and struggles in the world of mixternal messaging, across industries from tech to healthcare. Ready to make your brand roar? Tune in to Mixternal Messaging, Marcom that roars, a Liger podcast. For more information, visit ligerpartners.com and follow us on our social media.
Welcome back to Mixternal Messaging. I'm your host, Cynthia Hayes, and today I'm joined by Mike Petchenik of Petchenik Media Group. We are talking about earned media's role in internal and external brand messaging. Mike, I want to talk a little bit about if someone wants to get into doing PR for their company, where do they even start? What does it look like to kind of kickstart an earned media effort?
Yeah. So candidly, I would tell a brand new company, you don't necessarily need to hire somebody like myself or an agency. You know your story best, so you might have some traction doing the pitching yourself. But when you get to a point where you're getting some traction in the market, you're busy, you don't have the capacity for it, then you bring in an external partner, or you have somebody internally who's just designated to handle that stuff. So what I would do first is figure out what is your story, what is it that you want to tell, and then once you drill down on that, it's a matter of forging a partnership with whoever's doing the earned media for you, having skin in the game, so that when they come to you with opportunities, you're ready to roll. That train is moving, it's moving quickly. And the reporter's working on the story, they've got a deadline, and it's just a matter of okay, we've got to help them do their job and get the message out there.
Yeah, you were talking about coming up with your own pitch, essentially. That's always been interesting for me to talk to clients about, because the story they want to tell, or the way they want to tell their story, isn't necessarily the most interesting way to tell the story. Mm-hmm. So talk to me a little bit about when you do work with clients, how you help really zero in on what the audience might be interested in, or what does that look like? How do you refine a story?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. To your point, sometimes they just want to put out the sales pitch, mm-hmm. as opposed to talking about their value or their place in society and where they would fit into potential coverage. So, I think the first thing I do is I always sit down with a client and I say, hey, where do you want to be? First of all, what are the audiences you want to get in front of? What's the ultimate goal here? There is a dotted line between brand awareness and sales. Certainly PR alone isn't going to sell products, sell services for you, but having the awareness will help with that. So once we nail that down and we come up with, okay, what are the cool things you're doing? How are you helping people? What are your experts working on? Is there some research they're doing? Is there a study that you've commissioned where there's some interesting nuggets in there that we could share with a reporter? Because then you can sort of reverse engineer and get everybody back to your product in the first place.
That's right.
Without being overly salesy and overly markety.
Right, because then it's just interesting. It's educational. They're bought into the news that you're sharing with them that is hitting them in a valuable way.
Yeah.
And then, oh, by the way, this is the brand.
There's nuance there, for sure.
Yeah, that's great. So you've put something out there. How do you know if it's successful? What does success look like? How do you even measure earned media traction?
Yeah, that's a squishy one in some cases, but there are thankfully some metrics now that are, because of technology, we're able to keep up with. So what you want to look at is impressions. How many eyeballs could have looked at a story? So if you get on Good Morning America, how many millions of eyeballs had an opportunity to see that story? When the story ran, what about your website traffic? there is definitely data out there to suggest that when you get a media hit, people are going to go back to your website. Even if there's not a backlink in the story, they may Google you and then go and look. So you go look at your Google Analytics. The day the story ran, you might see an uptick in traffic, which is really helpful. Something else that us PR people use is what's called an MOZ or a Moz score, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Essentially what that does is it looks at the likelihood that when your story shows up on a media's website that you're going to have good SEO. So when somebody's searching for widgets, they're going to come across your particular brand of widget because you had an article in the Widget Times. So it's going to help with brand awareness. So all of this, sort of the totality of all this, is kind of what you look at to see, was this a successful campaign?
Yeah, it is a really important call out that earned media is called earned for a reason. It's really hard to get, and then it's really hard to measure and all the things, but it is totally doable and achievable if you're planning correctly and if you're thoughtful about where you're spending your effort.
And the other thing I would say is it's not all about instant gratification. Just because you outreach to a reporter one day doesn't mean that the next day you're going to be on the front page of their publication or covered, by their outlet. Yeah. What might happen is they'll take what you sent them and tuck it away in their pocket for another day, and maybe 2 or 3 months down the line, oh, I've got a story about this. I remember this guy reached out to me about something. Then you might actually get some coverage. So it's all about sort of planting that seed, because it's a long game. It's a marathon. Mm-hmm. Anybody who goes into this PR process thinking that it's just going to happen right away, it's not. If you want to control the narrative and control all of that, go buy an ad.
Right. Yeah. That's paid media.
That's what that is. Yes.
It's a whole different topic. Yeah. Okay. So there are definitely, it's a long-term investment to really represent your brand over time, to let it organically be picked up at the right time by the right people for your audience, all of that. I happen to know that you did something very timely and time-bound and saw some success from that. Could you share that story with us?
Yeah. So when I was a reporter, what I loved most about my job was holding powerful people accountable. It was just sort of like why I got into the business, to help people. And you don't necessarily get to do that on this side of the fence as much, but this was an opportunity I had recently to represent a group of small business owners who were in a battle for their livelihoods. A local city was planning to shut down a road in front of their businesses to vehicular traffic. Thousands of cars a day came in front of their businesses, and so they were standing to lose hundreds of thousands of dollars. So they engaged with me to help them get their story out to the media in an offensive way, not offensive, but offensive, to get the media to essentially do their bidding for them, to ask the tough questions of the city officials. And it was a long process. We had press conferences. I did some content where we went out and showed what was going on and the effect it was going to have. And over a 3 or 4 month period, we got enough media coverage out of this that it forced the city's hand to basically say, okay, we hear you loudly and clearly, and they backed off the plan. And that was gratifying because we were able to use PR for the greater good to help these folks keep their lights on.
Yeah, huge difference for that community, especially those business owners.
Yeah.
It is. It's not often you get to see those quick results.
Yeah, that's an example of there was instant gratification because there had to be. We were working on sort of an artificial timeline that was based on when the city was going to be voting on a lot of this
stuff. That's right. It was time bound, and they felt that sense of urgency on both sides of the table. So that worked to your advantage as well. That's great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Very fun. And I got to see that unfold live as it was happening too, so that was fun. So talk to me a little bit about, we've talked about where earned media has come in the last few years. Where do you see it going in the future? What kind of trends are you seeing or tools?
Yeah. So a couple of things I'm seeing is the movement towards, and this has been happening for several years now, of going after the micro influencers on social media. So it's not just pitching to the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times. It's finding that TikToker who has maybe 100,000 followers if you have a brand or a product that is going to be of interest to them, and it's sort of getting them to do the coverage. And it's non-traditional coverage. It's not like they're doing a story. They may just do a post one day. Something else that we're all seeing in every facet of communications is the use of AI.
Yeah.
So ChatGPT. I use a software that I use to pitch reporters that helps me keep track of who's opening and responding. There's even an AI function in there. I could have my press releases or my pitches written by AI. It's great for efficiency's sake, but I feel a certain way about using it for the final product. I think it makes for a great first draft, but you have to certainly go back and put it in your voice or your client's voice and make sure that it's in line with that. So we're going to see more of that. It certainly helps people do their jobs better and more efficiently, but I think there's a double-edged sword. We just got to be careful with it.
Absolutely. We use that on the marketing side of things. It is really nice not to have to stare at a blank piece of paper, to have something drafting all your thoughts for you if you give it a couple bullet points. But totally agree. It's really important to have a brand voice that stays true and is consistent, because then you're building trust for your brand. Right?
Yeah, and ChatGPT just can't figure that out with its algorithm by just taking a few of your words or, mining the internet for gems.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. Yet.
We do still add a lot of value as people, don't we? Okay, so thank you for joining me today. This has been a great conversation. Appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
Where can the people find you, Mike?
Yes, I have a website. It's www.mikepetchenik.com, and that's MIKEPETCHENIK.
I'll put it in the notes.
.com. Also on LinkedIn. And I just launched a new podcast called Two Friends Talking Trends. So you can find that wherever you stream your podcasts.
Like this one.
Exactly.
So exciting. Thank you, Mike. Great conversation. Thanks so much for joining us on this episode of Mixternal Messaging. I'll see you next time.